and ask you all to join us. And I was wondering if Terry Ann, I think getting a little feedback in the microphone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm ready.
Thank you. Todd, well, since you're ready, why don't you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for people to speak on items that are not on this evening's agenda but are within the purview of the Transportation Authority. We will also accept public comment on the agenda items as we discuss them. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment at this time tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to our regular agenda items as there are no minutes. And the first is the item 1.1, the review and discussion of a public opinion poll. Mr. Chittenden.
In my outdoor voice, if you don't mind, Chair Katzen. Our equipment is trying to get our equipment up. So welcome everyone to what is hopefully our second to last special meeting related to the Transportation Expenditure Plan. The first item here is, as the Chair mentioned, a review of recently completed public opinion poll. There is no staff report. We've outlined in the agenda language here that this is an action that you authorized on May 18th. And with that, I would like to just introduce Alex Evans from EMC, who will kick off the discussion for us tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the authority. I'm Alex Evans with EMC Research. Ross, I want to thank you for that introduction. That's quite some kind words you offered on my behalf.
I was going to go on. Yeah. I'm trying to keep the meeting short.
I was joking, obviously. So we're going to present the poll here fairly quickly here, and of course, we'll accept questions as appropriate. So this is a recently completed survey, just June 15th through 23rd. We completed the data collection. It is of November 2016 likely voters. We completed 800 interviews. But we did a split sample, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail when we get to it, where 400 people were asked the questions in one order, and then 400 people were asked questions in a different order, and that allowed us to try to understand the effect of order on the ballot measure. Okay, key findings. The first is that voters are optimistic about the direction of the county, and 3/4 of the voters see a need for additional transportation funding for Contra Costa County's transportation network. On that second point, and again, we'll show you the data, that the percentage of people who report that there is an additional need for more funding is essentially unchanged and has not changed since we've begun this work. Support for the transportation sales tax is supported by 65% of likely voters. That is within the margin of error of the 2/3 necessary to pass a measure like this. And it, again, essentially unchanged from previous work that we have done. The ballot question that we tested, so we've been working on trying to develop a clear ballot question that, of course, meets the legal standard as well. There have been some changes in the requirement of what is required for a ballot measure since we started this effort. And so we're trying to put that language in there appropriately, and again, trying to find the right 75 words that clearly describe what the agency is doing. And that sounds easy, but with a plan that you put together the TEP. There's a lot in there, so how do you say these things in a way that are really clear? I think we decided upon looking at what we did and looking at the results that effort is ongoing. We haven't quite got it quite right yet. The items in the TEP that we tested, again, this is consistent with what we have found in the past, are well supported by the voters. So we're very confident that the plan that you have put together and maybe adopting here finally in a couple weeks is in fact what the voters are looking for and satisfies that need that they're expressing for additional funding in the county. The survey presented the BART measure and the CCTA measure. For half of the sample, we did the CCTA measure first. For the other half, we did the BART measure. One of the things we were trying to understand is what is the impact of having those two measures on the ballot, and what is the potential impact of having funding for BART in two measures at the same time. Now, of course, if you think about the ballot that people are going to see in November, stories in the paper, I think just yesterday, about all the statewide measures. Of course, there's an election for president going on, in case you haven't noticed. So asking voters in a survey like this to just vote on two measures right next to each other is a little bit unnatural. That is not what they're going to be experiencing. So we think we overstated the impact of having the two measures on together. So as I noted, the environment, the mood in the county is continuing to improve. Today, 63% of voters say things are headed in the right direction, with only 22% saying things are seriously off on the wrong track. Generally speaking, you're more successful if you're asking people for money when they're in a good mood. You've probably experienced this in your daily life. We see the same thing happens with voters. So seeing this improvement in the general mood of the county's voters, we think is a good sign. And again, as I noted, the need for transportation funding, 75% of the voters say that there is a great or some need for transportation funding. So the measure that you're contemplating putting forward on the ballot is not something that voters think there's no need for. They do think that there is a need for it, and to be successful at 2/3, you only need to win a yes vote among the 75% who are saying there is a need. That need for transportation funding is high all across the county. It's the highest in Central County. It's 79%. In the east, it's at 69%. So it's above the 2/3 level all across the county. Okay, support for the transportation measure. So I'm on slide 11. So here's the question that we asked. The big change, or the big change in law that we've had to accommodate is we need to say how much it raises annually. So now all measures like this have to include language something along the lines of raising $97 million annually, and you also have to have the duration in the question. So previous ballot measures like this were not required to have that $97 million a year in there. I'm not saying people were trying to hide it. It was just not a requirement. So traditionally that number had not been placed in the ballot question. The focus was more on what's the tax, how's that tax going to change, how is the money that this tax raises going to be spent. So again, now we have to add in that language. That was not something we had tested in previous previous surveys because it wasn't a requirement. When we asked that question, 65% said that they would vote yes, 33% said they would vote no, 2% say they were undecided. I know standing before you and saying 65 is a number maybe a little bit hard to take. You'd rather I were saying 67. You have to recognize, of course, that a survey like this has a margin of error. There's no difference between me saying 67 and 65, other than 67 sounds a whole lot better than when I say it out loud. But I have to revert to my training and remind you that this is well within the margin of error. Our professional judgment is that this number hasn't really changed, and the degree to which it has changed might be because of the way we presented the ballot question. And we think there are ways to present it slightly differently to actually make it more clear to the voters on what you're trying to do. So this next slide here shows the difference between asking the CCTA measure first or the CCTA measure after the BART question. The result that I just showed you was the combine of the two. When we ask CCTA first, it's at 66, which I know sounds better. And then when it comes second, at 63, but again, statistically speaking, there's no difference between those two presentations. The order on the ballot will be your measure first. It will be among the measures in the county. So last time you remember you were measured J. There was actually an H and an I that came before the measure in 2004. The BART bond was on the ballot in 2004. It was measure BB. It came at the end of the ballot. So the actual order will be CCTA first, but the intent of this design was to see what's the potential impact of the two have on each other, again, particularly because they both have BART in them. The difference is none to minimal, and the advantage is to coming first, which you will do. Here is the results on that question. Again, the language varied a bit over time. So back to February 2014, the first survey that we did for the agency, you see a 68, 68, 65, 67, or 70, 72, and 65. In my world, that's a straight line. We rarely see a line so straight, and results from a survey being within the margin of error across time. So again, our judgment is that the number hasn't really changed back to February of 2014. If you felt good about it in February 2014, you should feel good about it today. Pulled out this demographic just to point out that the measure does better with the least frequent voters. People who have voted 0, 1, or 2, or 3 of the last 6 elections. In a November 2016 election, they will represent about half of the electorate. In a gubernatorial election, so like in 2014 or 2018, that number is significantly smaller. So you will face the most voters in a presidential year, and with the most voters passing judgment on it is when we believe you have the best chance. We've told you this previously. Should you decide to forego the 2016 election, your best next opportunity is 2020. So this is a difficult decision to make. I recognize that, but you should make it knowing that you're not putting it off for 2 years. You're most likely putting it off for 4 years. Now, having said all that, I have to add the caveat, of course, that 2016 has been a bit unpredictable. We expect it. My prediction is that it will continue to be unpredictable, and it could have the impact could be seen in turnout. It's unpredictable. We don't know for certain what is going to happen. The model that we have been using has been assuming kind of a normal turnout, looking at the last 4 presidential elections. So not the high of 2008, not the low of 2000, but averaging across those elections, so a fairly normal presidential turnout. Those numbers have been trending up slightly over time. This is our best guess at what that model ought to be. It is essentially what it's what we think is going to happen. No matter what happens, there will still be more voters voting in 2016 than there will be in 2018. So here's the BART question. This is the question we believe that they are going to be placing on the ballot along with you after your measure. When we ask voters how they would vote on this, 65% say they would vote yes, 32% say they would vote no. In 2004, again, when you were on the ballot with BART, you ran about 10 points ahead of BART in that election. BART got about 61, 62%, I think, in Contra Costa County. For BART to succeed in November with a 2/3 vote, They need 2/3 across the 3 counties. What they're expecting, consistent with what they've seen in the past, is that Contra Costa comes in a little under 2/3, Alameda comes in right at 2/3, San Francisco comes in above 2/3, however much above as you come in below, and voila, you get 2/3. So you will probably outperform BART, but BART can be successful at a slightly lower number in Contra Costa than you can be. You can see here the same effect that we saw with the CCTA measure. The one that came first did a little bit better. The BART measure got 67 when it came first, 63 when it came second. It averages to 65. Again, you combine them, you get about the exact same. So one of the things we were looking at was, there are basically 4 kinds of voters. If you're looking at it on just these 2 questions, there are people who vote for both of them. That's about 54% of the electorate. There are voters who voted for neither of them. That's 24% of the electorate. And then there's 11% who voted for essentially whichever one came first is what we found. There were some differences with demographics, but the biggest effect was which came first. So again, we think this is probably a good sign in that up to 76% of the voters were willing to vote for both one or the other, and a lot of the effort that the campaigns will undertake will be looking at those 2 11% slices and essentially trying to get them to vote for both. You don't have to be successful with all of them to be successful. So again, we think it's good news that up to 76% are willing to vote for one or both. Okay, the elements in the plan. So we went through and couldn't test everything that was in the TEP, but we tested a bunch of items. The ones that are in a box were like repair potholes and fix roads. Those are items that we tested and we included in the ballot question. So one of the things we're looking at here are how did the elements in the ballot question do when we pull them out and test them on their own. As you all know, and there's significant dollars in the TEP for repairing potholes and fixing roads, are very popular project, and accountability is very important. That's another thing that we found when we looked at those 2 slices of 11%. They were both voters who ranked accountability measures even higher than the overall. So accountability, repairing potholes, requiring oversight, again, is another way of saying that. Reduce traffic, require all the money, benefit local residents. Kind of see all down the line here. All of the elements do very well. You're of course always drawn to see what does the best and what does the worst, but you also want to just look at this as an absolute standard, each on their own. How are these measures doing? How are they received by the voters? If you look at the bottom of slide 23, you see the 3 things that really just focus on the money and not on how the money is being spent are the ones that do the worst. Again, one of the changes in the ballot question was the requirement to add the raised $97 million annually. That's just the total amount of money that the agency expects to raise divided by 30. Comes up to $97 million annually. Those 3, $97 million annually, last for 30 years, and enact a half-cent sales tax. All of those are the least popular elements of the plan. But even on the tax increase, 58% of the voters say that they support that element of the plan. And then just finally here, we wanted to also stress test the measure. So we know where you start. We know how the elements do. The next thing kind of required to do here is, well, what happens when a campaign is waged and there are proponents and opponents out there talking about the measure? What could happen to it? How vulnerable is this measure in particular to criticism? So we tested very briefly just 3 arguments for the measure, and then 3 arguments against the measure. The first, badly needed transportation improvements to the area. The second is basically saying, hey, this is an agency that's done some good things that you probably like. Don't you think they should be given some additional money to continue to do those things? And then third, again, we're really focused on this question about what potential impact the BART measure has on it. So we tested it as a positive argument. This and the BART measure will do these things together, and then you'll see we tested it as a negative as well. So on the negative side, we tested 3. The first, that it would double the tax, raise it to 10%. That's the strongest argument by far. The next 2, directly attacking BART as mismanaging their dollars. We've heard this argument. We thought it was an obligation to test it. And then third, that the ballot would be crowded with all types of other ballot measures and taxes. So we took the 3 strongest arguments on the 3 that we've heard, doubling the tax, too much money for BART essentially, and we're on with a whole bunch of other stuff to see how those 3 did, and the tax increase was the strongest. What you really see here is, again, almost no change. So the arguments for it and that we tested, the arguments against it that we tested, really had virtually no impact on it. So I think it's probably because voters see the need for transportation funding, and that the ballot question we're testing now, even though we think we could do a little better making it clear, really does present what the measure is going to do. So when we ask people how they would vote on it, they decide. The more as you tell them more and more about it, they don't really learn a whole lot more about it. That's not always the case with ballot measures. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And there are other members of the consulting team here that I will defer to if you ask a non-polling question or a really hard question.
Okay. Mr. Hudson.
Yeah. I think it's more the way you're saying it than what I'm hearing, Alex. But it would seem to me that those 75 words or whatever you're going to put on that ballot statement are going to be very important. It could be the difference between us making it or not making it. And you said you're not satisfied with it. Are you bouncing it off Don or anybody here? And because right now, that to me is probably the most important thing you can be doing in the next couple of weeks. But
it is a crazy.
It's close.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not just me. We're working with all the consultants, your staff, and some members of the board as well, and legal. Because what I want to emphasize, what we're really trying to do is be clear on what this measure is doing. The ballot question isn't an opportunity to be persuasive. It's an obligation to be clear and honest. Mm-hmm. And one of the concerns that we have in particular is we want to make it abundantly clear that this is a tax that is going, it's not a new tax. It's the tax that's going to an existing agency that has done some things that you should pass judgment on. So the tax is an augmentation of the existing tax. And we think the way we presented it made it sound a little bit too much like a completely new and different thing. And we've historically seen less support for that than when we can say, this is a tax going to an existing agency. You know some of the things they've done. Here are the things they're talking about doing with the additional dollars. But that's what we're trying to get to.
What I'm worried about is the person that walks into that ballot that reads about 6 words and is yay or nay that could be the difference. And so hopefully you guys, that's where you leave me out of the wordsmithing.
Well, I said we all get to weigh in on it, and that is really a decision we make on the 20th, along with whether to proceed, correct? Okay. Commissioner Arnerich.
Alex, that was outstanding. It's fascinating information, and I want to walk away with, I think I have 5 conclusions, and my 5 high priorities. First 3 are oversight, defined plan, fix potholes. Those seem to be the 3 overriding pluses if they're in the ballot. It looks like BART is, in our measure, isn't as high as it used to be, and that may the way I read it, it's positive and negative depending upon how it's listed. And then the fifth thing is, what happened in East County? We spent $1.3 billion there.
We finished the project.
They dislike us. They think we're doing, I mean, that's a pretty solid no of what, 38% out there. What do you think about, one, are those conclusions I'm saying, are those what you think are the highlights? And what's your opinion about East County? Why is that?
On BART, what I would say is that we have constantly been tinkering with the language to ensure that we are testing what the TEP is going to do and using language that voters understand. I'm not questioning the judgment of the voters, but that voters understand that it's clear what you're doing, and what they really want to know is what's the benefit of what you're doing. So we've been constantly tinkering with that. I do think in the ballot question, because we listed it first and we were testing the BART measure along with it, we were probably overstating how much BART was getting in the measure. And so one of the things we're looking at is really what's the right order for the items in the bullet points, if you will. And upon review, we think it probably shouldn't have been first. It's probably not the right place for it.
Right.
Given how much money it's getting relative to some other things, it probably shouldn't be the first thing. So I might have a slightly different explanation on your BART point, but I think we mostly agree. One thing I caution everybody about on the regional differences that we're seeing survey to surveys, of course, the sample sizes for each of the regions is significantly smaller than it is for the overall, and of course we're split sampling. So what we've been doing primarily on the regional is looking at all of the data and also comparing back to how the measure did in 2008. So the East County numbers honestly seemed a little high to us previously. They seem to be saying yes to everything, which we thought that's probably a little bit too high. The numbers in West County seemed a little bit low relative to what we were seeing historically on the ballot and how tax measures had performed and transportation measures had performed in the county. So I don't want to explain everything away with the margin of error in sampling, but that's a big piece of it. So that might explain it more than saying that the projects are done or they're turning on us. Ultimately, to get 2/3 countywide, you do need to do well in East County, and we think we're pretty close.
Yeah, I guess, and on the last one, I appreciate all those explanations. I guess what I was looking at is on East County, how the biggest opportunity to make an improvement is with that voter pool, is of those things that are in the measure that we could highlight that benefits that area so that they don't believe everything is done, that there really is something. And the more public transportation side of it will also bring in some votes from other areas, particularly central, Loma Linda, and south, because a perception is the freeways would be clearer, the more people, when the BART, e-BART gets open, that's really a benefit to everybody else, to be honest, on the road. So I would think from my seat and where we probably all sit, that's pretty important, how to get those 3 or 4 things, because you're right, I agree with Dave. Most people aren't going to read all the way down. We want to be transparent and really clear. These are some of the most important things, and the other things are listed because we have to. Somehow to find that 4th bullet that maybe brings in something from East County that's pretty clear that says this is, because I do think what you're saying is that if previously they were really enthusiastic, well, maybe because they saw an opening coming of one of the freeway extensions or something happening, if we can reinvigorate that, and however you guys think you could come up with that, I think it'd be a great idea. But thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Glover.
Thank you. What's going on in East County is that a lot of projects are still in the works. I think that one of the good things that happened the other day is when we were able to show the BART car, when we're able to cut the ribbon on Highway 4 and the completion of that. those are going to be the things that sell because people are going to say, we finally finished a couple of things. Yes, a lot of money has been poured into it, but people are still stuck behind the construction that are taking place. But when that all comes together, that'll be the beauty of it all. And a lot of that will be completed with the highway opening sometime up in the real near future. No, it'll be before that we cut the ribbon, I think. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that East County will be fine, but again, whenever you're still stuck in traffic and you have construction going on that's making people's life miserable, you're going to get that type of knee-jerk reaction. But I think we'll be fine in East County.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner Taylor.
Yeah, I'm going to say something about East County. If everybody remembers, unfortunately, I do remember, we really polled very low, a lot low. And East County really jumped up, particularly with involving Highway 4. And I got to tell you something right now. People are anticipating Balfour Road interchange. That's there with the 160 ramps. Just to talk to the people, I think, when Randy gave the presentation the other night, you know, what's happened out there is huge for us. So I think those numbers will jump again with the coverage, as Federal said, of what's coming down. But I just want to remind people and whoever that those numbers originally were very, very low. And people right now are very pleased. I don't get those signals I used to get.
Don?
Great. Commissioner Hudson.
Yeah, if I can, through the chair. Bob, one of the things that was kind of up for discussion was the cutoff from Vasco over to Byron Highway. Is that resonating? Is that the possible fourth bullet that Newell's talking? Is there something out there that really brings them in?
Well, here's something that really set a lot of people on fire was the transit station, BART. They really got excited. In fact, some people were planning on BART coming right through Brentwood, and I don't know where it was going to go. But the BART transit station, and definitely, you know, the improvements on Highway 4. I mean, there's a whole lot of issues that had never been discussed before. So when you say bullet point, BART had a big impact.
Other comments? Commissioner Keller.
I guess I'll do it with this one. I want to concur with what Mayor Taylor. It's not working. Maybe I don't want to concur. No, I want to. I want to concur with what Mayor Taylor just said. I think a project that could resonate in eastern Contra Costa County is the transit center in Brentwood. There is a lot of, the council has expressed their support for it. There's a lot of interest in it. It could be a hub, a transit hub, with Tri-Delta providing rich service to it. I don't know that you've ever polled it. I don't know if it's possible to poll it between now and, or if you're going to do another poll. But it would be an interesting item to poll and see if it, because when you look at the numbers of going the right and the wrong this direction, East County has the highest or the lowest going in the right direction. So that's not a criticism of anybody sitting around here, but it's a view of a populace out there. So I think there needs to be something out there, and you know, that transit center, and I know the county is planning a pedestrian bicycle bridge over Highway 4. If those two were combined as a single project, I wonder if that wouldn't generate some excitement in eastern Contra Costa County and move that needle on the direction that the county is moving, or these items are moving in. Maybe it's too late to do polling, Alex, but if that were possible.
It's never too late to do polling, and we'd be happy to, particularly if Bart is willing to chip in here, I think maybe we can work something out. But I think, and I know you're all aware of this.
Talk.
You got to always be selling here, right? You know, we want to make sure that we're, and I know you appreciate this, but I'm just going to reiterate it anyways. You know, there's the TEP, And that, of course, is voluminous and has lots of things in it, right? It's $2-point-something billion, right? You try to get that into 75 words that are fair, that are clear, that are legal, and that's the obligation of the authority. And then there's a campaign, and that campaign can and almost certainly will do additional polling, and they will be looking for opportunities to be more local in their presentation of what the measure is going to do. So in the 75 words, you can't be everything to everybody. You try to again be fair, be clear, and be legal. Right? Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Romick.
And since we're on the East County Love Fest right here, I'd jump right into the process and concur. And I agree that the BART to Brentwood would resonate better than anything else would in East County, although the extension off of Vasco to the Byron Highway and the connector to the airport is essential for good movements and movements out there. As far as everybody west of that, I don't think that's as captivating as the idea of getting BART as far as out to Pittsburgh. I mean, to Brentwood, and then the idea that maybe even someday out to Tracy, some possibility out there. We can start building on that. But once again, East County is a difficult place, having experienced it with 3 failed fire measures and failed library measures. They're not really big on taxes out there. And the fact that we're at 65% in favor, I thought was a good reading for what I've experienced out there lately.
Commissioner Worth and then Commissioner Butt.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Take Randy, so we always talk about that whole panel's off.
That whole end doesn't work.
Just screen.
No.
I always love to join.
Here, why don't you take my seat?
Okay.
If you plug this in.
Now we're on. Oh my gosh, miracle worker. See, that's what we're going to do in the next month, right? I want to thank you for that poll. I think it's really helpful to see kind of, as you indicated, you view this as sort of a solid line, that there are margins of errors, there are variances. And but it's really interesting to me in the context of what we've been hearing about the country and the world in the last month, that there's a lot of insecurity. And what this seems to show is there's a lot of clarity and affirmation in terms of transportation investment. And I guess that was one of the things that I wanted to ask, if you could give us some more information. I mean, going around, following the progress and checking in with all the cities, the fact that there has been universal, unanimous affirmative support to this. What is that saying to us about how the plan that we have in place, which is really what we're going to present to the voters, is one that will really resonate, that it fits, and so everyone around this table really has a good idea as to what is going to resonate in their individual communities. So can you talk a little bit about how that can play out in terms of our ability to communicate and connect people with this measure?
Yeah, I think my understanding is you've been to all 19 cities. There has been no votes. There have been a couple abstentions, and those abstentions have varied in their rationale from a conflict of interest, I believe, in Orinda, where someone felt like she couldn't vote on it because of her day job, to some, I don't want to minimize the concerns about the TEP that they had, but I think they were potentially could be addressed with some further clarity about what the measure does. So no one voted against it, which is quite extraordinary, right, to be able to put together a plan as you have and then go to all of the cities and ask them whether or not they support the plan and have no one vote against it is quite extraordinary. And it does point to one of the key ingredients in success for something like this. When you need 2/3 vote, you need to essentially have a consensus about what you're doing and have nearly no opposition and certainly no significant opposition. So it does point quite favorably to that. I do need to add, in case you forgot, you're still in Contra Costa County. Getting a 2/3 vote for a tax measure is extraordinary. It hasn't happened a lot. We think it's happened, I think, twice. So you're taking on something quite difficult. What you're asking voters to do, again, is not something they do routinely. So you shouldn't walk away from this thinking that this is a certainty or it's going to be easy, because it's not going to be either of those things. You've all stood for election, and you know what that can be like and the challenge that can face. And for a measure like this, there's no cavalry. It's you, right? The cavalry's not coming. It's you. You're going to have to, once this is placed on the ballot, in your official role as an authority member, you're going to have to go out there and speak to what the agency has done and ask voters to pass judgment on this measure. And then you're going to be asked to help in the campaign and go out there and campaign for it. There's not really anybody else who's going to do it. So when you cast that vote, you should think of it as also volunteering to then help this effort pass. It's not the end of the effort. It really is the beginning.
I'm a little skeptical of getting off in the weeds of which project is going to entice what voters in what area, or even getting off into some of these things about what general thing is going to entice voters. I think that, I look at this 75% of people overall who agree that there's a total need for funding. And that's your most compelling argument right there. And I think another way of asking that question would be, what do you think about traffic and transportation in Contra Costa? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? I'll bet 99% of people would tell you it's getting worse. And then the next question you want to ask is, well, do you want it to get better or do you want it to get even more worse, even worser? and get the message across that if you want it to get better, you vote for this. If you want it to continue getting worse, you don't vote for it. That's your choice. Because I've never met a person who didn't have a complaint about traffic, public transportation, or potholes. I mean, I don't get around all over the county, but I'll bet many of you haven't either. How many people have you talked to in the last year that have said, it's really easy getting around these days. I'm really enjoying commuting to wherever. I think you got to find the catchphrase that's going to get people to realize that this is their opportunity to either make it better or make it worse. Take your choice, period. Forget the details.
Right, and we found that the consistency in the number on need for transportation funding to be the most compelling in the survey, that has not changed, and so you're right on that. Although I don't think you should quit your day job and be a pollster, by the way.
Yeah.
A lot of good ideas, and we're going to take those into consideration.
I was going to jump in and add on to Alex's response to Amy's comment. We chatted, staff and the consultant team today, and a lot of what Alex was saying. I just wanted to relay an anecdotal story from our neighbors to the south. So they were on the ballot in 2012, and they didn't have unanimous support from all the council members as we have, and but they still went ahead, and they came up 800 votes short. So they really did make a concerted effort in 2014, and they did get 100% support of all council members, similar to what we did. But to build on Alex's comments, they kept that momentum going. Once they voted to put on the ballot, it wasn't one of these, wipe your hands and hand it off to the campaign. It was really staff and especially elected officials stayed active all the way up to the election in an appropriate role. And there's many things that we could talk about once we get to our next agenda item about things that the authority can do in its role to educate and inform the public beyond May 20th. So that's just a story that we can learn from some pretty hard lessons.
we want to win the first time.
Right. And I would concur with that. And I think again, thank you, Alex, for the work on the survey and the report this evening. I think there's a lot of it we can learn. First, we're going to be informed by it as we think about how to phrase the question for the ballot when we meet again on the 20th. And then I think there's a lot of good information here that'll help us as an authority provide public information, and then will help us as individual authority members as we go out and do what we need to do to make sure that this passes. So thank you. And with that, does anyone else have any comments, or shall we move on to our second item for the evening? All right, so the next item is the stakeholder update, review of the status of our, I think we already know what the answer is, of our city and town approach, some of the letters of support, public outreach, and outreach products. Mr. Chittenden.
Great, thank you, Chair Tatson. Yeah, we will be back here on May 20th at a special meeting, July 20th, excuse me.
We're not coming back on May 20th, Ross.
I still have May 18th in my mind. It was hard to get past May 18th, and we're past that. So July 20th, and major decision about going to the ballot. And again, three major points of input. We just heard the polling, the result of public opinion polling, and some fairly good news on that. In case you haven't heard, Randy Hisham and I just wrapped up our whirlwind tour of 19 towns and cities, and we have 19 city and town councils who have adopted a resolution of support with no votes. So we're very, very happy for that. I want to thank all of you for your efforts in making that happen, and the efforts of your staff. It was generally, we were welcome everywhere, and it was generally well received, and as I reported here, we have full support. So we go to the Board of Supervisors next Tuesday and seek their support, which is the last check mark on that side, the legal requirement to have a majority of the cities and Board of Supervisors. So we just wanted to quick update you on some of the other activities that have happened since May 18th on communications and outreach. I'm going to try to, what we wanted to do is just give you a real quick update on some developments with the web and social media and other material that we'll be able to use as we inform the public. So this is our main website, and we've added a tab here about our future, talking about the expenditure plan. This lists all the cities and the dates where we have support. Pardon me?
I see a mistake.
Okay.
There's one signature, yes.
She has better eyesight than I do. We wanted, we've developed what we think is a great little educational video, and wanted to just run that. This is relatively short.
For more than a year, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, or CCTA, has been working with residents and stakeholders to create a plan that will help keep Contra Costa moving, reducing traffic congestion while improving transit accessibility and connectivity to help.
All right, we're gonna come at this a different way. It's saying it's not available.
Reliably than before. CCTA met with stakeholder groups, hosted public workshops and telephone town halls, and heard
All right,
from
so
thousands of people.
we also have this Keeping Contra Costa Moving website, and we'll start it from there and see if we.
For more than a year, Expenditure
Uh,
has been working with residents and stakeholders to create a plan that will help Contra Costa
Remember when none of the speakers worked a few minutes ago?
accessibility and scenic roads to help get us all where we need to go. Major corridors like Highway 4 and more reliably than before. And CCTA met with stakeholder groups, hosted public workshops and telephone town halls, and heard from thousands of people.
Did we ever tell you how great Terry Ann is? It's nice to have her sitting here.
For more than a year, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, or CCTA, has been working with residents and stakeholders to create a plan that will help keep Contra Costa moving, reducing traffic congestion while improving transit accessibility to help get us all where we need to go, faster, safer.
There we go.
more reliably than before. Contra Costa Transportation Authority, or CCTA, has been working with residents and stakeholders to create a plan that will help keep Contra Costa moving, reducing traffic congestion while improving transit accessibility and connectivity to help get us all where we need to go, faster, safer, and more reliably than before. CCTA met with stakeholder groups, hosted public workshops and telephone town halls, and heard from thousands of people online and in person. Based on this input, CCTA developed a transformative 30-year transportation expenditure plan unanimously adopted by its board to improve BART, bus, ferry, and other transit service, invest heavily in fixing and maintaining local streets and roads, smooth traffic on major corridors like Highways 4, 24, 242, and Interstates 680 and 80, improve transportation access for seniors, children, and people with disabilities, create more bike lanes, pathways, and pedestrian walkways to increase safety, and invest in new transportation technologies that will encourage greener ways to travel, protecting the environment and the health of our communities for decades to come. Contra Costa residents came together to create a transformative transportation expenditure plan for the future, a plan that protects the environment, promotes a strong economy, and enhances the quality of life in every part of the county. A plan as diverse and dynamic as Contra Costa County. Learn more about the plan and stay in touch with us at keepcontracostamoving.net.
Thank you, Terry Ann. And that demonstrates why you did not hire an engineer to be in charge of your communication program. So that runs about 90 seconds or so, and we have a couple of 30-second videos that will be available as well. Okay, this is. Yeah. So, and then we've revamped our Contra Costa, or keepcontracostamoving.net page to contain educational information about the TEP. Again, here's the link to the video. We have I'll start with supporters. Again, we're looking for, I think the three of the biggest things we'll be considering on the 20th again is the results of the polls that we just heard, the unanimous support from the cities, and the report out from how we fare with the Board of Supervisors. And we're starting to collect some letters of support. So we have Bike East Bay here. East Bay Leadership Council has taken a position. They haven't submitted a letter yet. John Muir Land Trust. We have, I know Debbie Toth sent me, you have a handout in your packet. She's on vacation, but she's promised to send in a letter of support. So we want to make sure that we fill out all of these pages with folks that support us. We have many other engagements. I'm going to Walnut Creek Chamber of Commerce. We'll be meeting with Cocoa Tax and many other groups in the upcoming months. We are in the process of developing a lot of material for use. So we've developed a fact sheet for each city. So again, this is something we'll ask your staff to help us distribute through newsletters, have on your at your desk and so forth. So we have it for each city. We're have mostly done additional, so these really focus on the benefits for each city. So a lot of it you heard in our presentations, putting that on a piece of paper so that we can get the word out. We have additional handouts either done or underway related to some of the environmental benefits, some of the stronger land use policies that we're putting into the plan, how we've embedded innovation and technology throughout the plan, what it means for labor and jobs, taxpayer accountability, real nice handout for transit, both the BART and bus transit, effects on business, the economy, seniors, disabled. And then we're going to have rack cards that we're working with BART and all the bus operators to put out or put on their vehicles. We've also developed some digital ads. If you visit our website, you may have seen a few. I have some statistics here if I can find it. We already have, I think it's something like 6,000, they're not called hits, what's the proper term? Visits, 6,000 visits where the ads are popping up with people that frequent our website. And then for you and others, we will be developing a stakeholder toolkit. So we know that you'll be out being approached often by virtue of being a member here, as well as being invited out. So we want to make sure that you're properly prepared to do that. So that will all be coming out shortly. Well, we'll start getting it out, but certainly we'll want to put it in action after the 20th. So just real quick, just wanted to give you a quick preview. The main message was 19 cities with no no's, and turn it back to the chair.
Great. Well, congratulations to all of you, Sham and Ross and Randy, who did, I think, all of these visits. So great job for bringing it back. I'm going to just make one comment before I turn it over to Commissioner Mitchoff, which is, I wonder if, in order to start filling out your list of endorsers, if we could send letters to all the transit agencies, BART, County Connection, et cetera, asking for their support.
We have that underway with the bus operators, and we need to talk to BART. I think we would probably ask BART for reciprocal support.
All right, Commissioner Mitchoff and then Commissioner Arnrich.
Thank you. I know you're coming to our board next Tuesday. That's just for the regular support along with these cities. When does it come to the board for putting it on the ballot? Because we only have one other meeting. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah.
July 19th, or then we're looking at August 2nd.
Right. So second, so you have basically 3 more meetings with the board. So there'll be the 12th for approval of the TEP. Assuming you approve that and it comes back here, and assuming we approve it on the 20th, then you have to pass your resolution, which is a 2-meeting action. That'll be the 2nd and the 9th. So I've been working with staff, and that's all set to go, and it works. That schedule works for the voter's office.
Ross, it's great to see all of that. And I think as you're right, we get more things, it'll get even more robust. 2 small things, but we ought to do it because it's going to alienate 2 of those communities. There's not 19 cities. There's 2 towns, the town of Moraga, town of Danville. And interesting, both those communities went through a big deal 30-something years ago to change their name, and it alienates people. It just makes people cringe when you say city of Moraga. Yeah, so I've seen it in all of these. We're listing it, so we need to, change it. We're going to get a hangover here that those are going to show up. Just to be respectful, just as everybody wants to be called by whatever is appropriate. And the only other observation, it's really hard to find on our website to even know that page is there with that video. I looked. I finally had to look up and see how you found it, because it's under, and you'd have to go to future. It doesn't connect. It ought to be its own, icon, front page, lower right. Most people are going to look there, click on it, update about what's happening. The video had one little thing, and it sounded like it was edited into it. There was a pause where it said, all these great things we've done to make your routes better. And then there's a pause, and it says, than before. I mean, that's not exactly a sentence. It just ending where you ended. It sounded like you were waiting for another phrase to come after that. A noticeable change. But I think the video and what it shows is great. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I did have one more question. And this may go to Randy, or I know once we approve it, meaning the authority, that we no longer can use public dollars, so we have to get a campaign manager, consultant. Are we moving forward, or is it under your authority to spend X dollars? It's already part of.
Well, there's no public funds spent on the.
I'm sorry?
There's no public funds spent on the campaign.
No, I know that, but.
A conversation outside of this room will find you.
All right. I agree that we need to make sure the public knows that no public dollars are being used.
Yes.
All right.
That is clear. Right.
Can I just clarify?
Okay, Commissioner Worth.
Yeah, could I just clarify? First of all, good question about reaching out to the transit agencies, since they've been an integral part of this. So I've had conversations with the GMs, and they're very happy to talk to Director Peoples tonight, and we'll be moving that forward. I think it is very clear to clarify, as Commissioner Mishov mentioned, that all of our efforts are information. It's all public information. It's all, using the resources we can to do educational. And then once we vote, to whatever we decide, it's up to an outside campaign to take that next step. So I think it is really important to emphasize the fact that our public resources are strictly within the law in terms of what are the requirements of a public agency. So good to clarify that.
Commissioner Durant.
Thank you. One minor thing on the video. I was sitting here debating whether to bring it up or not, but there was a spot where it said innovative green technology, and we showed an old-fashioned green stoplight.
Yeah.
I would.
Even LED.
It wasn't even LED. That's what I was just going to say. If there's a way to fix that, I think any image other than that, since so much of what we're pitching is that this isn't traffic centric, perhaps. But anyway, if there's a way, I would do it. Otherwise,
all right.
Yeah.
Any other comments, Commissioner Worth?
I'm sorry. Can I just ask one other question? Obviously, what we found from the survey tonight is that people are interested in sort of some of the broad investments that are included in this plan, but they're also, when we look at the various areas of our county, what are the projects and programs that are going to be, we spent a lot of time making sure that the TEP reflects the priorities of our 4 sub-regional areas, as well as the resources to knit, the county together in terms of commute sheds. Will there be some graphics in these educational materials that will show people from a visual standpoint? They can go to their community or their region, sub-region, and look and see what the proposed investments are in those areas? Yeah, other than the fact sheets, so they can, kind of see, okay, what's going to be happening in Pleasant Hill or in La Miranda or in East County or West County, those kinds of things.
So, yeah, we have this countywide map, and this is similar to the one that you've seen if you've seen the reformatted TEP. So we could maybe jigger this a little bit to try to focus in and make it a little more interactive. Right now it's not completely static. If you go over and hover over these different icons, you can see where some of the improvements are. Now, we need to be careful. A lot of these are illustrative. For example, the bike ped program, those are projects to be determined. So these are kind of a random set of projects out of our bike plan or out of some of the other plans that we have. As you know, many of the programs require guidelines, and the guidelines will lead to the specific project. So we're a lot of thinking going on about how to best show this without leading people on to things that may not be in the plan.
So just 2 questions. One is, first is, can you tell us what will be on the agenda for the special meeting on the 20th so that everyone is prepared?
Yeah, Mala, could you give me an assist on that? There are going to be quite a few actions that lead up to a final action.
So you'll have there's a resolution approving the appropriations limit, because that's required to be in the ordinance, so that'll probably be the first thing that you see. There will be a resolution or an ordinance, approving the TEP, an ordinance for the state BOE to actually agree to put the measure. It's the ordinance actually that the Board of Equalization has reviewed, saying we're going to comply with their regulations, and this is how they're going to administer the tax, assuming it gets approved. And it also has the ballot language in it. And then lastly, there should be a resolution asking the county to call the election, which will also have the ballot language in it. So there should be at least 4 different documents.
All right. And then could I ask that we add to the agenda, and this discussion has been a start of it, sort of a plan for what the public information program will be that the authority will conduct? Because we don't meet in August, and so essentially it would be 2 weeks before, 2 months before we meet in September. By then, whatever we're going to do will largely have to have been done. So I think it would be useful for the authority to understand essentially what's coming and roughly when you think it's going to come. It's not that I expect it to be finished by any means, but that essentially you give us an outline of what you expect to do, I think.
Yeah, so that'll be...
Commissioner Mitroff, sorry.
Well, if we had to, we could meet in August. I know we don't normally, but if we had to, we could.
But just right now, we're not planning to.
No,
so
I understand that.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of that will probably be building on what you're seeing here as we build it out. And then again, we may, and I'll work with you on this, Chair Tats, we may, depending on how things are, we may want to bring in a resolution of support for BART.
Okay. All right, are there other comments this evening? If not,
and perhaps one for AC
Peoples,
as well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And
right.
AC.
Then, given that there is no correspondence, and then we are adjourned, and we'll see everyone either tomorrow morning for an APC meeting or on the 20th. Oh, excuse me, Randy. Sure.
So I just wanted to brief you on 1665, AB 1665, which swapped Contra Costa County in the AB 210 bill to the Transportation Authority. So last Monday, I got a call from Assemblymember Bonilla's office saying that the Speaker, the pro tem of the Senate, was holding the bill hostage for something. And so it wasn't heard on Monday. So I'm just mentioning this because ultimately it was an urgency status. We made a number of presentations to the legislature. We called for an early review from the governor. I mean, Mark Watts did a great job up in Sacramento of making sure we brought labor to this pro tem's office. He deserves a big thank you. We called Southern California to our contacts. I joked that I emptied my Rolodex in Southern California because the 2 leadership positions, the Speaker and the pro tem, are both from Southern California. So Dario Fromer, I called him that night. We called Skaggs, so they were Hassan Icarata was in Salt Lake City. He called Kevin De Leon, Senator De Leon, and we had engaged LA Metro to call. We tried to get Mobility 21 to call, and Mark took labor in the next morning, and we engaged some of you to call the Senator's office to implore how important this was to us. And I'm not sure we'll ever propose another piece of legislation, at least. But we moved the mountain, and we ended up getting the bill approved by the Senate. I think it was Thursday night, and I think by 9 o'clock in the morning, the governor had signed our bill. And so there's a lot of people to thank. And I just it was an amazing journey for sure of calling, and we called our elected officials, and Jim Frazier and Senator Glazier and Assemblymember Bonilla, and everybody weighed in. So if I called you, thank you for making the phone calls, and it was just a team effort to get that darn thing signed by the governor. It's amazing.
So where's 1592? You've done it once, you can do it again.
So 1592, AB 1592, no steering wheel, no operator, no brake pedal. It made it through the assembly side, the assembly floor 76-0. I think industry started to take that bill seriously. And so the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee voted on it 11-0, but they added 2 amendments. The first amendment was a data privacy amendment, which I'll say more about that. The other piece was that they wanted some reporting. And this really is a pilot, it's a research project. So we agreed with some minor modifications to the data amendment, and then we agreed to report on any collisions or anything that goes wrong with the shuttles. And because of that, then the bill is going to be referred back to appropriations because it may make the Department of Motor Vehicles do something involved with this pilot, so it may involve adding a body or two to DMV, which is ridiculous, but it may happen. So it has to go back through appropriations, the Senate Appropriations Committee. But on the data amendment side, I got a phone call from my friend in Washington, D.C. saying, hey, the Consumer Technology Association of America is opposing your bill. And I said, who's that? They said, that's the largest technology-based association in the world. And I said, so I call it the pea-shooter-sized organization. So the pea-shooter-sized organization raised the ire of the largest technology-based association in the world. And he said yes. And so we've now, I think, negotiated where, because of the input from the Googles, the TechNets, the Consumer Technology Association, Honda has actually come out now, our partner opposed, because this data is very important to industry. They don't know exactly what they want to do with that data, but they don't want us messing around with the data in a proposed amendment at all. So I think that the committee, Senator Bell's committee, has agreed to pull that, and we're looking at the reporting side of it. And so once they get back from recess, we'll hopefully push that bill through the Senate Appropriation Committee without the data amendment, and then draw the ire of any other opposing opposition that wants data privacy and data mentioned in the bill. So once again, if we get this signed, for sure, that'll be the last piece of legislation that we ever deal with again.
All right.
Until the next time.
Well, thank you, and we are adjourned until July 20th. July.